You are listening to the Live Well with Arthritis podcast, helping you to live a healthier and happier life with your arthritis. Every episode contains science-backed support, expert advice, and a deep understanding of the reality of living with arthritis. I'm your host, Emily Johnson, also known as Arthritis Foodie. I'm a best-selling author and the founder of Live Well with Arthritis. Whether you've been living with arthritis for years, or you're navigating a new diagnosis, or perhaps you have symptoms and are looking for answers, this podcast is for you. For more support, you can join the waitlist for my course, Live Well with Arthritis, on www.livewellwitharthritis.com/waitlist. That's www.livewellwitharthritis.com/waitlist. Places are limited, so the earlier you sign up, the better. Now, let's get into the episode. I am delighted to welcome today's guest, Renee Anderson. She has become a powerful voice of hope and authenticity for mothers living with chronic illness. She's a former middle school teacher and reading specialist turned full-time mum, homeschooling children of three children, and the founder of the Rheumatoid Arthritis Mama, created from her own journey of becoming a mum with rheumatoid arthritis. After her RA diagnosis in late 2017, Renee began sharing her journey and the raw reality of life with an autoimmune disease. And since then, she has grown her community into the thousands and has featured in major outlets like Healthline, Everyday Health, and Creaky Joints. She also runs the Rheumatoid Arthritis Mama's Sisterhood, a private support group of nearly 4,000 women. Renee's mission is to inspire other autoimmune warriors to live their best lives and to remind them that they are never alone. Renee, honestly, I'm so excited to have you here. You can hear it in my voice. To start us off, could you take us back to 2017? What did those early days of, homeschooling your three kids, motherhood, and, your RA diagnosis on top of that, what was that like?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. It's such an honor to be here. We've been friends for years on Instagram, and it's just so fun to do this. But yeah, to take you back to 2017, at the time I had a 6, 4, and a 2-year-old, and I was really struggling with my health for several years before that. I probably dealt with symptoms for 10 years before I was actually diagnosed. And it was your typical quote unquote mystery symptoms that the conventional doctors couldn't figure out. So then you're shuffled from specialist to specialist. And then, it's just really tough at that phase. And I know so many women can relate to that in between period of time in that season when you don't know what's wrong with your body. So when I finally got that diagnosis, it was a shock, obviously, but it was also this weird sense of relief that I finally had an answer to what was going on. And I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but when you go from not knowing what's going on to finally having an answer, you feel like you can then start moving forward instead of feeling like you're just spinning your wheels. And so, I was told from my rheumatologist that I had a severe form of RA and that I needed to start an aggressive medication regimen right away. And that scared me. That really scared me because I wasn't sure. I honestly thought, I was like, I'm going to die. Like that's how little I knew about RA. It was like, I'm going to die. I don't know what else, to do. And so, but something inside of me just said, there are other options. Like medication isn't your only option. And so I started delving into functional medicine and other alternative, integrative type approaches. And so for me, it then took me down a lot of different educational rabbit holes. I was looking at every possible avenue for treating and managing my symptoms because I knew I had young kids at the time, and I knew that I had to be my best for them. And so that's when I started my Instagram account, was because I didn't know anyone outside the geriatric community, let alone a woman in her mid-30s with 3 young kids that had this. I just didn't have anyone in my life with it. And so I started my Instagram account, just reaching out into the internet saying, is anyone out there? Can anyone relate to what I'm going through? And that opened up like a whole world to me of women who were like, yes, it's me. And it just made me realize that there was such a need for support for women like me who were not geriatric, women that still had a lot of life to live. And so that's kind of how my journey started. And for me, it was a matter of survival and knowing that I was just on the beginning phases of my motherhood, but also my schooling journey with my children as well. So,
My goodness me, I can really relate to the feeling of relief when you get that
yeah, and
diagnosis.
it's weird to admit that you're
Mm,
relieved to get a
mm,
diagnosis, but people that understand truly do understand what I mean by
yeah.
that. Hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. And juggling all of those things that you were juggling, my goodness me. So how did you navigate all of that as a young woman and a young parent of three? So what would be your advice for someone listening who is a mum, of one child, two children, three children, however many children they've got, and they've just been diagnosed with arthritis? What advice would you give them in that moment?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to let yourself and allow yourself to feel all the feelings. It's such an emotional roller coaster to to get a diagnosis, but also the ups and downs of being symptomatic, dealing with flares, dealing with parenting and running the house and doing all the responsibilities that you have. It's a lot mentally and physically. And I think what really struck me was the emotional piece of it. And that's really where when I was connecting with women around the world, when it came to RA, I realized that the emotional piece really wasn't addressed as much as the physical piece. And so for me, I've spoken to thousands of women over the last 8.5 years that I've been doing this. And the first thing that they come to me with is, I was just diagnosed. What do I do? Or I'm scared. What's next? What can I expect? And my first thing is, I'm always like, okay, number one, breathe. Number two, it's okay. Whatever feeling you're feeling is okay, whether it's anger, whether it's apprehension, fear. Um, there's so many emotions that you could feel. But we can't hold that inside. We have to process those feelings and let them flow through us in order to get to those next stages, which is like, okay, now that you know, now that I'm taking this in, I've accepted it. Now let's move forward. Um, and a lot of women can get stuck there. They can get stuck in the mud puddle. I always say, it's good to be, it's sometimes we have to be in the mud puddle, but at some point we have to decide to pick ourselves up out of the mud puddle, dust ourselves off, and keep going. You know what I mean by that? And so,
Absolutely.
and so, so my advice is, take it one day at a time, take it one step at a time. And obviously you're going to want to figure out why you're feeling how you're feeling, whether it's your symptoms are triggered by food or an environmental piece or whatever. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think that addressing right away the emotional piece is number one, should be the number one priority, and just saying, you're going to be okay. You're going to have your times of struggle, but you're going to be okay. So,
I love that phrase, the mud puddle, like
yeah,
getting yourself out of that mud puddle. And there's so many different emotions that come when you're diagnosed, and even just living with a condition like this. And I always say that they can coexist all at the same time.
absolutely.
You're allowed to feel angry, you're allowed to feel sad, you're allowed to feel depressed, but you're also allowed to feel hopeful at the same time that, things could get better. All of these emotions can exist all at once. And
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you said that. It's so important. And the going back to that mud puddle, my next question was on resilience and getting up and out of that mud puddle. How
Mhm.
has having RA made you more of an intentional, resilient parent.
Yeah, I think adaptability is a huge factor. Being adaptable to whatever the day might bring you, because as you know, with RA, it's very unpredictable and things can come up and you might have your whole day planned out and you might wake up stiff as a board and realize you can't do that day, you know? I remember a time this winter when my kids were so excited to go skiing and we had a big ski day planned with our friends, and I got there and I was in such pain. I put my ski boots on and I went out on the bunny hill for 20 minutes and realized I can't do this. And I came in, I had my little moment, I had my little cry in the bathroom. I mean, this was just like a few months ago. And then I went on with it, you know. I got out there, I watched my kids ski. We had a great day. My girlfriend was very understanding. And then but that's hard, is what I'm saying. And to acknowledge the difficulty of that is important, and to realize that like you have to be flexible and you have to be okay with pivoting when you need to pivot. And so that I think is the most important thing to remember, is that no 2 days are alike. And that, but just because you're in bed one day doesn't mean tomorrow you can't go conquer the world. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also like well done to you for having that moment to acknowledge your emotions. You had the cry. You also said to yourself, do you know what? Actually, I can't do more than 20 minutes. I'm going to stop. I'm going to watch my kids instead and not join. But that also is a bit of a process in itself, right? Because there are
yeah.
times when I don't know about you, but I've definitely pushed myself beyond what I know I can do because I feel guilty or feel like I'm letting people down so I think that's a real mark on you knowing your body and knowing yourself to have that moment to go, actually, I need to step back right now. However hard that might have been. And that leads me on to my next question, which is about that guilt that we may feel sometimes when we do have to, adapt, change plans, you do things in a different way, adjust things, so how do you handle that sort of like, I suppose that there's another sort of arm of this of like mum guilt as well as like chronic illness guilt. But how do you handle that, Renee?
I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that the fact that you're even feeling guilt means that you're a good mom. Because
Oh,
the
yeah.
moms that don't feel that guilt, they're not the ones that are caring as much as you're caring. So I think that is so important, to acknowledge that these women are already good moms. And I think sometimes letting go of the image of health that we once had has to happen in a way, because who we were before our diagnosis is different than who we are after our diagnosis. And I'm not saying that we're defined by our disease, because that's not the case. But I'm saying our capabilities sometimes change. And that means that we need to remind ourselves that, like, I can still be a good mom with RA, you know? Our kids they don't want us to be the perfect parent. They just want our time and connection. And so if we can provide time and connection with our kids, they're going to be a lot more forgiving when like plans have to change or schedules need to be adapted. You're also showing your kids how to keep going and have perseverance
Mhm.
despite your struggles, you know?
Mhm.
And so I think that's important as well. And I think for moms, they forget the fact that their kids, they are very, like I said, adaptable, but they also are going through their own feelings at the same time. They're feeling, they might get disappointed when their plans have to change. Um, and they might go through their own emotional processes like we do. And it's
Mhm.
important for us to acknowledge those and to guide them through those emotions, but also to realize that, kids also, they want to be tasked with purpose. Every child wants to feel purpose in their life. And when they feel like, oh, I'm helping mom with the dishes today, or oh, what do you need help with, mama? How can I help you? How can I support you? How's your pain today? I used to keep the pain scale on the fridge or whatever, and I would circle every day what my pain was for the day, and that really helped when my kids were young, before they really understood, um, the ins and outs of what I was dealing with when they were really young, and so that was a good tool. But I think sometimes sometimes set our standards so high that we forget that if we set them too high, we can't even reach them. And we don't want to set those bars too high. But when it comes to mom guilt, I think that the most important thing to remember is that you can still be a good mom, and you're still providing, the life that they need, um, with your diagnosis and with your RA, because you have acknowledged that within yourself, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And the pain scale that you described on the fridge is so interesting because it's something that I spoke with one of my clients about, one of my coaching
Yeah.
clients, because she said, I don't know how to talk to my children about
Mhm.
my pain, and I did
Right.
say I said, I don't always make suggestions, but I say, would you mind if I make a suggestion? And I said, how about you use a scale like the one that you've just described? And I said, say to them, oh, actually I'm a 5 today, or I'm a 1 today, I'm a 10, and it just helps kids to have that visual, or like
Yes.
verbal understanding, that where you're not upsetting them, because I bet at times maybe your kids have worried about you. Would you say, Renee, at times they may have worried about you?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think, my youngest, who's now 11, she was 2 when I was first diagnosed, and she's the one that's really in tune with my emotions and with how I'm feeling. And so she was the one that every day I'd use a dry erase, and she would erase it, and then she would remind me, like, how are you today, Mama? And she would
Oh,
have me circle
beautiful.
it. Yeah. And so, it's just, I think when you're a mom, you have to remind yourself that you have to, and I know, we talked about this earlier, but you have to understand how to prioritize and how to juggle the priorities
Mm.
of the day,
Hmm. Hmm.
and how to reassess based on how you're feeling. And that's just the
Hmm.
reality of living with chronic pain.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
the kids, they learn adaptability, but they also learn compassion. When they see me struggling when I'm limping into the grocery store, it's real to them. It's a real tangible
Mm.
thing that and so they see it. They see it. And, I remember one time my son, it was last year, he was 13 at the time. He's almost 15 now, but I was brushing my hair after a shower in the bathroom, and he saw me brushing my hair, and he just came in and he's like, "Can I finish for you, Mom?" And he's like way taller than me, and it was just so special because he
So
didn't
sweet.
know he didn't know at the time that my hands were hurting and I was struggling, but he didn't know that at the time. But because of his experience growing up with me, he's learned that compassion piece, and he's learned, to it just comes naturally, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I didn't tell him that I was in pain. I didn't, but it was such a gift to my mama heart for him to just step up like that as the young man of the house and just say, "Oh, Mom, can I brush your hair for you?" And not even knowing the gift that it was, you know, that
That's,
did,
yeah.
So,
Oh, it's
anyways, that's just a
absolutely,
little
yeah.
thing.
No,
Yeah.
it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that
Yeah.
story. How wonderful. And we'll come on to dad, for the dads listening, we'll come on to
Sure.
dads and partners and marriage, and all of that kind of stuff a bit later on. But you mentioned about weighing priorities, and
Mhm.
on those high pain days, on those days when you were, you gave an example, limping in the grocery store. How do you decide what's non-negotiable? How do you
Mhm.
decide what stays and what goes on those days?
Mhm. I think if they're really high pain days, then I think the most important thing is to keep the children alive. To be
Yes, pretty
honest.
pretty important.
I mean, let's be honest. Let's make sure that they're fed and clothed and okay. But we have to also remember that, some days you're going to be in bed more than other days. And it's okay sometimes to maybe have a little flare kit for the kids, especially when they're young. I use that, like where I had a bin of things that the kids knew that would come out just when mama was flaring, or, and or like using, they say don't use technology as a babysitter, but sometimes, let's be honest, mamas, the iPads and the tablets and the screen time, it sometimes has to be used to our advantage sometimes when we are dealing with a flare. And that is just the truth of it. Or relying on friends, relying on our support groups. I have a wonderful community of good girlfriends right near me. And, there's been many times that I've depended on them to take my kids for the afternoon or whatever. So it's those little things that are important for figuring out how to prioritize things and to help you prioritize things. But the most important thing, Emily, is to keep them alive. No doubt, no doubt.
That's definitely a priority for sure.
Yes, yes. And that's just the truth of it. I could
Mm,
say all these perfect things, but the dance is, do we have groceries right now? Do I need groceries delivered if I can't walk into the store and back out? Is there a meal service, or, is there something that my husband can go grab for us because I'm just not up for making dinner?
mm.
So there's these, the reality of it is that we just need to get through those hard times, those times of flaring and things like that, because it's not forever. And we need to remind
Mm.
ourselves, I might be not the best mom today in terms of like, oh, I'm being a super intentional mom. We're doing all these wonderful educational things. No, that's just not it. That's not it today. So, and just giving yourself the grace to be okay with resting when you need to rest.
Mm,
And so when I say, those priorities, and it has to be a dance, it does, because you might have certain appointments that you have to get to. As a busy mom, I
mm.
juggle my kids' sports activities and all their schedules and appointments, and it's like, what is the most important thing today? you know so it's really about doing the most important things and letting the rest slide for however long it needs to slide.
Yeah,
So
that makes
yeah.
that makes complete sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And
Hmm.
in terms of the practical side of things with the homeschooling, you mentioned you've got friends nearby that are supportive and things like that, but how do you structure your day with the kids when you're homeschooling them so that they're getting their work done, they're doing everything that they're meant to be doing without,
Yep.
pushing your body into a flare and you getting
Sure.
stressed and things like that?
Yes. Well, the joy of homeschooling is that we do get to set our own schedule. And for us, what has historically worked for us is to do afternoon school, to be honest.
Hmm.
Our school day, a lot of times, wouldn't start even now. Like, it's usually after lunch we get our day going, and sometimes that means we don't get school done until dinner time, or sometimes it spills into after dinner time, and that's okay, and that's the joy of it. And so for us, having an adaptable schedule is very important. If I'm struggling with morning stiffness that morning, or if I'm just feeling like my body can't handle it, or I need a little extra time, there is that flexibility. So I do think homeschooling is very RA friendly, for moms that deal with chronic illness. The other thing that I have learned to do is we do couch school or bed school, where literally I remember sweet years of us just piling onto mama's bed or piling onto our couch together. And I have such sweet memories of me flaring, but at the same time, like, we're all together, and it was just a really sweet time, where it's like not where I'm standing up and teaching for the day, but it's more like a cozy school.
Yeah, I love that. And that,
Yeah,
you've found what works for you, what works for your family, what works for your children, and that's
right.
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say a flexible schedule, and
Mhm.
also, um, you know, bed school, couch school, things like that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. So moving on now to the other kinds of support that you have at home with your wonderful husband who you've been married to for 22 years. Is that right?
Yes, I think June is next. Yeah, June I think is 22 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Congrats.
It's crazy because I still feel 25. Like I don't know why. I don't know how this could be possible. Still 25 in my brain, but
So for the partners who are listening to this episode, or the dads, or the mums, and anyone who's listening who's got a partner with chronic illness, what does real support look like? Because, it's not just I've done the dishes, what does real support look like, Renee, as a mother of three with chronic
Mhm.
illness?
I think just like with parenting, education can equal empathy. And I think when it comes to whether it's our children or our partners or our friends, I think it's so important for them to understand what we're going through by us explaining things and us being honest with what we're going through. Because someone that doesn't have chronic illness really doesn't understand. They can say, oh, oh, my grandmother dealt with arthritis, I know how that is, or whatever. But dealing with inflammatory chronic pain is a lot. And so I think for my husband, the most important thing is that, I'll share a reel with him every so often, or I'll share a little article with him so where he can really understand what I'm going through. And that's been over, the course of, 8.5 years now. But also for him for me to also not feel like I have to apologize
Mm,
for my pain, whether it's tough pain day or not, and him understanding that an apology is not needed when I need his help.
mm,
But also just having them be in tune with what we might with our cues. I think living with someone for you know a long time, it lends itself to them knowing you without even having to say a word. And I think my husband is really good about that. I remember one time I got home from running around with the kids and he had drawn a bath for me and made like a anti-inflammatory dinner, and he had it like
oh,
setting there, and like the bubble bath was waiting with the dinner, and he was like, I'll take the kids, you just take your bath. And it was such a blessing for me because I didn't even have to tell him what I needed.
oh,
He just knew. And so,
amazing.
but that takes time, and
Mm,
that takes someone that, truly, that's where that unconditional love comes into play. And that's so important for people to have. And, the people that don't have that, having friends and family that are supportive like that is very important. So, I would say my best advice for partners is to lean in when they're trying to explain things to you and how they're feeling. Lean in and truly try to put yourself in their shoes as much as you can.
mm,
And also, don't expect them to always be able to like like explain how they're feeling, because
mm,
sometimes I don't have words for how I'm feeling.
mm,
And I think that's important for them to just be ready to step in, in whatever capacity that means, whether it's just like you said, like I said earlier, getting in the mud puddle with me when I'm having a tough day, or making a meal, or and honestly, as a mom and a wife, our partners, they can't read our minds.
mm,
So
mm,
and sometimes saying I need help isn't enough. You have to be more explicit than that. You need to be more intentional with your words. So instead of saying, oh gosh, I'm really struggling today, like give them a task and say, can you please do the dishes for me? Can you please fold that basket of laundry?
mm,
Could you handle dinner tonight? Because I really like my body is shutting down. I say that to my husband, like my body is shutting down and I need you to like pick up the reins here.
mm.
So, and I think that's important for him to like be ready to help as needed. So,
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And yeah, communication is such a
Hmm.
huge part of it. And I think as well, I don't know
Hmm.
culturally in America if it's the same, but in culture in the UK, there's kind of this like keep calm, carry on. And we may not always actually say when we're in pain or when we're struggling. And that has been a real kind of psychological thing for me to get over and be able to explain to, to a partner or to family and friends that I am struggling. So I think as much as it's, yeah, obviously amazing that you've got someone so in tune with you. Sometimes if you don't have that, you have to communicate, don't you? I think that's really important. So that
Hmm.
leads me on to my next question about friendship and family boundaries. And yeah, how do you navigate that when obviously, of course, not everyone is your husband and can understand you so well. So
Sure.
how do you navigate your friendships and family relationships
Well,
too?
I do think it is hard because with my lifestyle, it is a go, go, go lifestyle. And I had to teach myself that no is a complete sentence. And that I don't need to explain my why every single time I decline an invite, or sometimes I just can't, my body just can't handle it for
Yeah.
the day. And I think my friends that are my true friends have truly come to understand that, they don't need an explanation. And so that's been important for me to find those true friends that truly get it. But also, I think when it comes to family, like if, like for instance, if it's a family party or whatever, and they want me to contribute something, or they're like, oh, it's a parent or it's a sister who's putting pressure on you to host something, you can say, I'm more than willing to bring a dish to pass, but I can't host this time,
Mm-hmm.
because that is a lot of pressure when it comes to family and things like that. Or even like, hosting activities for friends or get-togethers for play dates or anything like that. There can be a lot of pressures on moms to say yes and be, but it's a muscle, and you have to practice, and you have to build that muscle, and it comes easier after a while. But my situation is a little unique because I don't have any family where I live. My parents live 3 hours north. My husband's parents live 2 hours south. So I have never had that family support system close by. So I've had to learn to adapt on my own without that. Um, so that's been interesting. But like I said, I do have wonderful friends. And knowing your own boundaries is absolutely essential when it comes to RA, when it comes to any kind of chronic illness, because even you don't even know how you're going to feel from day to day. So to overcommit yourself can, honestly, it can stress you out, which can flare your symptoms, and it's not worth it in the end. To, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, to push yourself beyond your limits, because then you're the one that ends up paying for it in the end. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, something that is really, really key, having those people around you who you don't have to explain to,
Mhm.
because no is a complete answer. And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for sharing that part. And so for somebody listening to this who is juggling their own health condition and they haven't got a partner and children, what what would you say to them into, or they haven't got support around them? How would they be able to help themselves and navigate this kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I created my Instagram account in a way, and my support group, is because when you need support, when you feel like everyone around you doesn't get it, and that includes
Mm.
husbands sometimes. I've talked to
Yeah.
so many women who are like, good for you, but my husband is not that guy. He just doesn't get it, or he doesn't understand when food's not on the table when he gets home from work or whatever.
Mm,
It's a struggle. It is
mm,
absolutely a struggle.
mm,
But finding people that do understand is so important, because you need that validation that you're not like a bad person, or
mm,
that you are enough. And so whether it's finding an online support system, or finding friends or parents or anyone that can, understand, is so important. But when you don't have that, I mean, the most important thing to remember is that you're going to do what you need to do for that day, you know,
mm,
and you're going to be okay. and seasons come and go. This is the thing
Mm,
when it comes to family and friendships and, people, relationships coming in and out of our lives. Like the season that you're in right now, most likely in the next 5 years, your life is going to look totally different.
mm.
I had a friend tell me one time that your life changes every 5 years, and I found it so true. She told me that like 15 years ago, and that pattern has continued. Every 5 years, my life looks drastically different. So I think the most important thing is to not sit in your and you don't wallow in the fact
Mm,
that like things are bad right now, things are horrible, they're going to be that way forever. No, they won't. I promise they won't. I
mm,
promise they won't be bad forever. And also you have to choose to not be a victim of your circumstances. And
mm,
what I mean by that is, we all have I always say we all have our stuff that we've lived through, that we've gone through, the struggles that we've had. um, I could go on and on about my past, but we can choose to either wallow in that and feel sorry for ourselves and play a victim, or we can pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and learn from the past, and be a better person
mm,
because of what happened to us. And so I think that's really important, and sometimes people that are in the mud, it's hard for them to hear.
mm.
But it's important to keep that in the back of your mind, I think, because it does help you to like pick yourself up at the end of the day when
Mm.
you do, because life just keeps going, and
Keeps
everyone's
going.
got their stuff, and
Yeah.
it's what we do with our stuff that matters. So we can either choose to be a victim or we can rise above. And just remember that no season is ever forever.
Mm, I love that, and I keep coming back to this on another podcast episode I did about the victim mindset and the CEO mindset of your life. It keeps coming up. It's really strange,
Mm.
and I love that you've talked about that because yeah, knowing that you're not a victim and you do have choices,
Mhm.
but similarly, on the other side of that, if you mentioned about being stuck in the mud, I'm just picturing someone listening to this who either has a partner or doesn't have a partner, but they're so overwhelmed with their
Mhm.
chronic illness and they are thinking to themselves, I don't know how I could add children into this mix. I'm so
Mm.
overwhelmed with my condition. I just don't know if I can do it.
Mhm.
What would you say to them if they're kind of so overwhelmed with their diagnosis and so overwhelmed with their condition that they just don't know what to do when it comes to
Yeah,
having children and having a family?
right. I think the most important thing to ask yourself is, have you always pictured yourself as a mom? And if you've pictured yourself as a mom, whether it be from a young girl or, meeting your partner or whatever, if that's a part of what you picture your life story, unfolding as, then I don't think that a chronic illness should hold you back from that. The other thing that I think that people need to ask themselves is my heart ready for something like
Mm,
that?
mm,
Because it does take a lot from you, but in the most wonderful way. I mean, motherhood is the hardest, most rewarding job in the world. And so I think it's important for women who are thinking about having families to ask themselves, like, will my life feel complete if I have family or not, if I have kids or not? And so I don't think it's a matter of, I do think that obviously our physical limitations need to play a factor. But in the end, you have to really look inside yourself and ask yourself, like, is this how I picture my life, leaning toward is motherhood and companionship like that. Um, so so yeah, I think for me, I always knew that I wanted to be a mom from a very young age. From the time I was a little girl, I'm the fifth of 8 children. And
wow.
I always knew that I was going to be a mom. I don't know. It was something inside of me that, was just very natural. And so if you're the type of person that pictures that for yourself, then I think that if it's possible, then go for it. Um, and I think that what we can hold ourselves back sometimes, and I think our bodies can naturally rise to the occasion. women tend to have this thing about them, which is like that grit and that perseverance, and that you know, we find something inside of ourselves that just um, allows us to not only keep going, but also like it's something innate inside of us that allows us to rise to the occasion of whatever it might be coming our way. So
Women are incredible.
honestly,
We
honestly, I
really are.
mean, it is so
Yeah.
true. I think there's so many women that shortchange themselves or think that, they get down and they're like, well, that's fine for them and it's not for me. Or like, I get that all the time. I could never homeschool my kids, or I could never, I don't know how you do it. But it's not, it's when something inside of you, you know, it's natural. It's just natural, and it's just something that you don't want to shy away from, because at the end of your life, you don't want to have that feeling of shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Mm.
So
Feel the fear and do it anyway, as we
yes,
were
exactly.
discussing before we started recording.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I do think that there's a lot of fear that comes with it. I've talked to countless women who talk about, I want to have kids, but I'm scared that I'm not going to have the energy for the
Mm,
kids,
mm,
you know? And I think that for a lot of women, once you have those kids, they are completely and solely dependent on you and your family to survive, and you find something inside of you that is just like, it's just this mother instinct that just kicks into play, and you do what you need to do. So, but I think, it's funny because so many women, speaking of motherhood, it's so many women struggle with an onset of autoimmune disease
mm,
after pregnancy.
mm.
And so I know you were talking about on the front end of things, already being diagnosed and then deciding if you're, going to have kids. But on the other end of things, there's so many moms out there that deal with RA onset postpartum. And their first RA onset flare comes postpartum. That happened to me
Mm.
with my first baby. And then I ended up having three kids in a 4-year time span. And by the third kid, my body was done. Um, but it's just it's when it comes to hormones, I mean, I know you've had a podcast all about hormones and pain and things like
Yeah.
that, and it really does play a big role in how we feel. So
Mm.
that's a deep dive for another day, but
Do you know what? There's actually so much more we could talk about. We're coming towards the end of the episode, so you're gonna have to come on again, Renee.
yes, can
But
I please, because we didn't
yeah,
even talk about like the yeah
yeah,
my yeah,
we will, you will get you on again 100%. So
yes.
I like to end the episode with one thing that you want people to take away with. But before we get to that, I've started doing these quick fire rounds as well. So I'm going to ask you three quick fire questions, and just the first thing that comes to your head, just say it. So, so what would be your emergency dinner for the family when you're in a flare?
Oh my goodness. Can I cheat and say
Of course you
takeout?
can.
Because
Of course
that
you
is,
can.
usually I'll call my husband and I'll be like, "Can you please pick up dinner? Because it's just not happening tonight unless you take the reins here."
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of times it's him picking up something on the way home.
Oh,
So
yeah.
uh,
That's perfect. Yep.
yeah.
One word to describe the women in your sisterhood, in your group.
Okay. Well, honestly, and we didn't really talk about this much, but I want women to feel seen, heard, and understood, regardless of the way that they decide to manage and treat their disease. I want
Mhm.
women to feel like they can come into my sisterhood with a feeling like they're not going to be judged for the way that they are treating their RA, because I feel like, especially on, social media and things, there can be a lot of legalism with,
Mm,
oh, you treat your RA one way and I treat mine the other way, and mine's right and yours is not. And I will never tell a woman that the way that she chooses to treat her RA is any better or worse than
mm,
mine. I think we all are bio individuals. And I think the important piece to remember is that what works for one woman might be totally different than what works for another, you know? And there's women that might shout it from the rooftop that some protocol or diet or program works for them. But, we all have our own individual health puzzles to solve. And the front of my
Absolutely.
the front of my puzzle box looks totally different from the front of yours, Emily.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I wanted to create a space because I was on online support groups and I saw the negativity and I saw the cattiness and I saw just the just the lack of compassion
Mm.
that was being shared, and it was just really sad to me. And so I wanted to create a space that was free of that judgment.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, because we're all on our own journeys, aren't we? And
Yeah.
it's yeah. So another question, the final quick fire. What's your self-care ritual? A long bath or a 5-minute prayer or something tasty from the fridge? What's your little self-care moment?
Yeah, well, I would say it's like a hot shower, but hot showers can be really exhausting when you're, uh, you know,
Yeah,
and so I do love a warm bath, absolutely. As I mentioned that story about my husband earlier,
yeah,
but for me, it is just walking in my woods. I have beautiful property here with woods and trails that I share a lot on my Instagram stories, and for me, it's getting out into nature. And for me, it's like going anywhere with my husband. Um, and honestly, just being outside is so important for me. And or sitting and just sitting around our fire. Like we have fires all year round. We have winter fires, and so sitting around a nice, relaxing fire for me is so important. Um, and so, yeah, nature for me is always number one. We live right next to Lake Michigan, so watching the sunset over Lake Michigan, and so yeah, I'm a nature girly. That's gonna be my nervous system reset is
yeah.
always outside every time. So
Yeah, I'm a fellow nature girly too, which I'm sure you already
yeah,
know about me.
yes.
So, Renee, we're coming to the end of the episode now. What is your one key takeaway for people listening, who, either their mums, they're living with chronic illness, they're not, maybe their partner has got it. What do you want them to take away from this episode?
I think the most important thing is that we can still live good lives and we can still be good moms and wives with arthritis, with chronic pain. Not every day looks the same. And so we really have to dig into our why. And what is our why? Because the why is what's going to keep us going. And for me, my why is my children and my husband and my family. And so it is a dance of priorities every single day. We have to choose what's most important for that day. And sometimes things, have to be dropped off, and that's okay, you know. And I think the most important thing to remember to keep you going is your why, and to remember that, that you can live a great life despite your disease.
Wonderful. So, Renee, where can people find you?
All right. Well, I'm on Instagram. That's my love. That's my first love. It's where I started. You can find me at the Rheumatoid Arthritis Mama on Instagram. And then my private Facebook community is on Facebook. You can find that at just search the Rheumatoid Arthritis Mama's Sisterhood and it should pop up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Renee, for coming on the podcast.
Yes,
We're going to have to get you on again, and it's
for
been an
sure.
absolute joy.
All right. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you, Renee. Take care.
You
Bye.
too.
You've been listening to the Live Well with Arthritis podcast. If you're enjoying it, please follow and leave a review. I'd really love to hear from you. To sign up to the waitlist for the Live Well with Arthritis course, head to livewellwitharthritis.com/waitlist. For any questions or to suggest topics, email us over on hello@livewellwitharthritis.com. You can follow me over on @arthritisfoodie, that's ARTHRITISFOODIE. And you can also follow Live Well with Arthritis on @livewellwitharthritis to stay tuned for the latest updates, news, podcast episodes, recipes, and a whole lot more. I'll see you there. Until next time, live well and lots of love from me to you. P.S. Before you go, I have to let you know that this podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your medical professional, whether that be your rheumatologist, GP, specialist, or other qualified professional. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.